record this. So yes, good evening. Tonight we're starting with a new section, which is choice structures. With one of my previous programs, Mr. Walkershaw actually gave you a sort of some like an introduction into this already, when he wanted to work out like the biggest between two numbers, I think. And then he showed you guys a little bit of how the if statement works. So that's the one we're going to work with tonight. So choice structures, remember loops. We created loops because we wanted to have one set of code that is run multiple times. Now with choice structures, it is having a set of code that only happens sometimes. So it doesn't always happen. And that's the idea with this. So the idea of this program is we're going to generate two random numbers, just to practice that again. And then what highest must do is it must display the highest between those two numbers there for us. So basically how this works, we want to see if number 1 is the biggest, display number 1 there. Otherwise, if number 2 is the biggest, display number 2 there. And the same with lowest. If number 1 is the lowest, display it there. Otherwise, if number 2 is the lowest, display it there. You'll see I did, because some of you will say we can just use max and min. So when I did this, I did actually say display the highest of the two random numbers, but using if. So I sort of forcing you guys to use that. Get on with this. Alright, so to give you an introduction, I just added an extra button down here. So you'll see these 6 buttons, you're going to do them for me. I'm not going to do them tonight. You'll do them once we're done with the lesson. Then you'll generate the two random numbers. You'll see random 1, generate a whole random number with 2 digits. And then the other random number, generate a real random number with 3 digits and 1 decimal place. So when these buttons are clicked, they'll put a random number there and there. Then when you click this, shows the highest, click this, shows the lowest. In this one, it will take number 1, and if number 1 is an even number, it will display it there. You know what? Change number 2 to also a whole number though. I think this needs to be a whole, otherwise it's not going to work. We can't check the other one. So just a whole number of 3 digits. So just change that one when you do that, so that both of these numbers are whole numbers, so that we can do our even and odd. Alright. So what I did, I just created another button. I just added 6 variables and just gave them values. So how conditional structures work is we use if. You can say if and then press tab, and then you'll see it says true there. So that's your condition. So we can say something like if num1, my variable num1, is greater than 3. So if num1 is greater than 3, then with it then always say begin and end. It doesn't need to be there, but it will make your life better if you just learn to always put begin and end. So now in there, we can do a show message, and then let's say yes. So what do you think if I run this program now? Will I see yes or not? What do you think? So you don't think number 1 is greater than 3? Yeah, I see. So how this works, this checks it. So if this condition is true, then it's going to do this. So if number 1 is greater than 3, then it will show us this message. So that's sort of how this works. So let me just see. So if we run this, oh, you won't see this now. Sorry, let me just change that. All right. So what we do, if I play this now, and I click this button, you see we do see the yes. Because number 1 is greater than 3. If I put a 6 there, will I see this message now? No, we won't. Because only if number 1 is greater than 6, we'll see this. So you'll see if we play this now, and I click this button, nothing's going to happen. But now we can have alternatives to this. So after this end, we must just take away the semicolon. Then we can say else. And then put a begin and the end. So how the else works means if the top condition is not true, then it will do this one. So it's going to check if number 1 is greater than 6, then show a yes. Otherwise, it's going to show a no. We're going to say yes. Otherwise, we're going to say no. So let's see. What do you think? What will we see now? Will we see yes or no? Degree number 1 is 5. So if you click this, we'll see no. Because number 1 is not greater than 6. So it won't do this one, it will do this one then. If I go back to 3, what will I see? Will I see yes or no? Or nothing? Sorry? Yes. Because number 1 is greater than 3, so we'll see yes, and we won't see the no, because a no only happens if this condition is not true. So these two, they're linked together. The else always goes with an if. You'll see if I take this else statement and I just put it somewhere else, let's say I just put it there, you actually get an error here. And you see if I hover over it, okay, it tells me there's an end expected and what's. So the else by itself doesn't work. It needs to be after an if. So if this condition is true, it's going to do this. Otherwise, it's going to do this. Now, we can even expand a bit on this. So we don't even need to say 3 there. We can compare if number 1 is greater than number 2. So you can compare two variables. So if I do this, what will I see? Will I see yes or no? All right, let's see. And we see no. Perfect. Because if number 1 is greater than 2, which it's not, then we'll see this, but it's not. So we can't see this. So else means then we'll look at this. Now, these are just, if this is true, it's going to do this. Otherwise, it's going to do this. But we can have more conditions. So we can add on here, if number 1 is greater than 2, say yes. And then we can do an else and say if again. So if number 1 is greater than 2, say yes. Otherwise, if number 1 is equal to number 2, then we can say begin and end. And then in here we can say draw maybe. So see how this looks now. So if the if always starts it, you need to have your first one needs to be an if. So if this condition is true, do that. If it's not true, go on. So else means that condition wasn't true. But then if says, okay, so that one's not true, but now first check this one. So if they are equal to each other, say this. and then there's the end again, and then there's a else again. That means if both of these two are not true, then do this one. So if we've got this, num1 is 5, num2 is 9. What will I see? Will I say yes, draw, or no? What do you think? Sorry, say again. Okay, so my question is, if I run this now, which message will I see? Will I see yes, or draw, or no? So look, I'm comparing 1 and 2, see if 1 is greater than 2. Then I'm comparing if number 1 is equal to number 2. And otherwise I show this. Yes, because number 1 is not greater than 2, and number 1 is not equal to 2. So that we'll just do a no again. So if we run this, we'll just see no again. Perfect. So let's see if we, yeah, ask me. 100% right, yes. So this is your first comparison. Your if one starts it off. So these ones will only happen if this one is not true. If this one is true, it's going to skip all the else's. So that's sort of how this works. If this one is true, it skips those and doesn't even read them. Only if this one's not true, then it will go to the next one and see if this one's true. If this one's true, it's going to skip this one. But this else will only happen if all other options are all no. Then it will do this one. So let's see, I just changed this thing. I said now if num1 is less than num2, say yes. So what will I see now if I run this program? Say again. Okay, let's quickly see. So if we click this, we see the yes. Only, you'll see if I click OK, then all the rest didn't happen. Because number 1 is less than 2. Then we just see the yes, and these ones would be ignored. I just changed that sign. I made that smaller than. Yes. Yes. So as soon as it gets the one, it goes basically top down. As soon as it gets one that's true, it's going to do that one, ignore everything else. So just see there, I changed that number now. So what will I see now? Is number 1 smaller than number 2? Is it? So that one's not true, so it skips past. So now I check this part. Is number 1 equal to number 2? Yeah. Yes. So let's see how this works. So click this one, and there we see draw. So how this works, you can now, so it must always start with an if. You can do an if and only an if, which is fine. But you can add an else to the bottom. You can go if with an else. So if this is true, it's going to do this. Otherwise, do this. or so, but they in a sequence like this, it will always start with an if, and if you want to, it can end with the else. You don't need the else, but it can end with the else. But in a sequence like this, you'll only have one else. You can, if you want more conditions, what you can do is you can actually add else ifs. Now with the else if, you can have quite a few if you wanted to. You can have another one here saying greater than, and you can have another option here saying, I don't know what else. Let's say greater or equal to. So you can even do stuff like that. So you can have multiple else ifs. Now, if we look at these numbers, let's just change this again. Num1 smaller than 2. So I'm making num1 5 and num2 4. So now if I run this, what will I see? Which option will I see? So in the first term somewhere we had where we said something like, what is 23 mod 5? Can you remember that? Can anyone remember that? So if we do 23 div 5, that's what is 23 divided by 5 if you do it on a calculator, but you throw away the decimal. And you agree the answer would be 4 then. Because when you calculate it would say 4 comma something. 4,6. And then remember to get the mod, we have to see what got lost. So what we did, we said, okay, so what is 4 times 5? Which is 20. So that meant 3 got lost. Alright, can all of you remember that a little bit? Vaguely. But when we did that, I showed you that if we go something like 23 mod 2, if you can remember, when we mod by 2, then if it's an odd number, the answer was always 1. So if we had 23 mod 2, or if it was 19 mod 2, it was 1. And if it was a 15 mod 2, it was 1. So always when you mod by 2 and it's an odd number, the answer is 1. And every time it's an even number, the answer was 0. Try to remember that sort of a little bit. Otherwise, you can go look at the class we did on this. I'll see if I can just post the recording, but it should be on Google Classroom still. All right, but so if my question to you now is to check if number 1 is an odd or even number, what you'll do is you'll just say number 1 mod 2. So if number 1 divided by 2 gives me a remainder of 0, if I take number 1 and I divide it by 2 and the remainder is 0, then we can say even. Otherwise, we can say odd. So that's basically how you check if something is an even or an odd number. So you take your number, divide it by 2, and if the answer is 0, then it's even, otherwise it's odd. And is 5. Let's quickly run this. So what should our answer be now? What should we see? Should we see even or odd? See if number 1 is 5. What will we see? Is it an even or odd number? Yes. Alright, so if we click this button, then we see odd. So, and that's how this one works. If we change this now, let's say we change number 1 to a 8, and I run it, then you'll see we're going to see even. So if you don't want to do pop-up messages, you'll still do all the same stuff. You'll check if it's an even or odd number, and then you'll just say, all right, in that edit box, whatever, I'm going to say, I don't know, 1, in the text property, I want to put the word even. Otherwise, I'm going to put the word odd. So if I play this, I click this button, then it will say it there. So, all right. Yeah, so with your displays, you must just remember it's always, that's basically your two options. It will either be your edit box.text gets the value of, or what you'll do is you'll do your show message if you want the pop-up box with the answer inside. That's your two ways of displaying any answer. And then if it's fixed words, you just put it there. Otherwise, if it's a variable, you just put the variable there. And then, so the if now gives you choices. If that thing is true, it's going to do this part. Otherwise, it's going to do this part. Yeah,